Okay, so we're here tonight. As Joel said, I'm a marriage and family therapist. I dedicate my practice to working with couples, presenting especially with issues around money. And inevitably, I end up finding my way into working on a lot of different topics with couples and then circling back through their financial life. So I hope that you find this presentation helpful in your own life as you are maybe in a one stage or another of your marital relationship. But understand that most of you are residents. Is that right, Joel?
Have residents, students, but yeah, mostly residents.
Yeah, yeah. And so knowing that you are at a unique point in time in your life and development and probably excited to get started in your career as dentist and making that transition to hopefully making a lot more money than you have up to this point and tackling student loan debt if that's part of your reality. So as Joel said, if you have questions along the way, drop them in the chat box. I'll do my best to try to answer them as we go along. And if not, we'll have some nice time for open discussion at the end. All right. So what are we going to talk about in this presentation? Well, I'm going to share with you guys why it is that couples fight, at least why I think couples fight. We're going to talk about some of the pain that it creates for couples. Most importantly, then we're going to dive into a little bit of what you can do about it to make changes. And then, where do you go from here? If this is something that's challenging in your life, where can you go from here? What can you do to help improve your chances that you have a healthy relationship with your partner and with your financial life? So we're going to take a moment, and I just like you to stop and think about if you're in a partnered relationship now, or if you have been in one in the past, on a scale of 1 to 10, how frustrated are you with money fights? Just take a moment to think about that. How often do they come up for you? How much frustration do they create for you? Do you feel like things ever get to resolution, or do they just keep circling around and around and around? There's no right or wrong answer. We're just trying to take a pulse and get real with ourselves about what's happening in our relationship with our partner and with money. All right. So, I realize working with a lot of people that even talking about and naming the fact that you have financial conflict is a huge step forward. Talking about money and our relationship with money is very challenging. I had clients in just this week where we're talking about um, they're not in a strong acute fight that's going to end the relationship, but they're trying to sort through how to buy their next home. And as we've been talking about it, the level of frustration would go up from kind of being okay to 3, 4, and then 5 or 6. It would get relatively high. And when we were talking a little bit more, one of the things that came up is that they had a past experience working with real estate agents that felt really frustrating and overwhelming for both of them, but they didn't really talk about it. And now they're trying to buy another property, and it was starting to create frustration for them. A lot of fear and anxiety from that past transaction was coming up. And so we know that people will go through ebbs and flows with frustration around different topics, things that maybe haven't worked well in the past. You have to revisit again. That frustration may ebb and flow in time. Transitions are a very natural place for increasing levels of financial frustration. When you're leaving your residency and you're making that transition in the job market, there's going to be a lot of financial changes that come up. And so we can anticipate that there's a high potential for financial frustration to increase when something even good is happening, like graduation or transition out of a residency. So just wanting to help normalize that this is a regular part of what happens in many couples is they're feeling confused about which direction to go, what they need to do to work through it effectively. And so we just want to be able to be honest with ourselves and with our partners, what's happening for us, and being able to talk about it directly so it doesn't come out in a more aggressive or hostile way, or in a minimizing or withdrawing way. So what I'd like you to do is, as I read these statements, I have a little fill in the blank that I'm going to give, and I'd like for you to see what you fill in and what your reaction is to these statements. You have $100 in the bank account. You have $10,000 in the bank account. You owe $20,000 in student loans. You owe $200,000 in student loans. Your wedding will cost $20,000. Your wedding will cost $5,000. Your partner just spent $5 on a coffee today. Your partner just spent $10,000 on a motorcycle. David, I can see you got a big smile there. I like it. Retirement savings is, fill in the blank for yourself. What's the word or adjective that you would use? Just think about it for yourself. Financial security is, fill in the blank. Your partner's parents need $500,000. No, that's too high. Well, maybe that's not. Let's just make that up. Let's have fun with this. $500,000 to help buy a new house. Your partner's parents need $2,000 a month to cover living expenses. You just hid last month's credit card statement. I didn't put this down, but your partner just hid last month's credit card statement. If anyone's so willing to unmute themselves, I'd be curious to hear your reaction to these fill in the blank statements. What did you notice?
I noticed that my reactions are often compartmentalized, meaning one might be positive, one might be negative, but I almost view them independently. Like if I'm thinking about something that is positive, like say what money might be in the bank account, I conveniently forget about the money in student loans.
Yes. That's a really great point, David, that you can forget where everything is. I was working with another client recently where they're a successful executive. They have a growing retirement account balance. But we started the conversation with them saying, I feel so broke. And I said, oh, well, tell me about that. What do you mean? And they said, well, I only have $1,000 in my checking account. And that was a little bit of a head scratcher, knowing that they're a highly compensated executive. I said, well, again, remind me what you have in your retirement accounts. And they kind of listed it off, but we didn't need to know exact numbers. And it kind of had a little like, oh yeah. But then when we went a layer deeper into their history, what we're going to talk about in the presentation a little bit later, said, I think if I remember correctly, you had a family business failure somewhere in your early childhood, like late childhood, early teenage years. And I said, does this $1,000 in the checking account feel familiar to you in what it felt like in your childhood? And their eyes got much bigger. And what they realized is that they had taken on their family's chaos in the day-to-day, week-to-week management of their finances, and were recreating it over and over at an unconscious level. They just thought, I just can't keep any money in my checking account. But there was this deeper association or memory around what that chaos was like. As we open that up and look for a past money experience that may have explained some of that compartmentalization or not seeing a connection with the present and the past, the relief came up. Now, time will tell whether they get their checking account balance managed to a higher level that would be reasonable for their level of compensation. It was really insightful for them. And so I think this is part of what we're going to work into in this presentation. Is we all have a money history. We all have experiences and really subjective set points around what's right. I wonder if anybody would talk about their reaction to their partner just spent $5 on a coffee today.
And feel free to type in the chat box if you're shy to speak up.
So what I know is some people love their $5 a day coffee, and some people loathe it. And it's, I think most of us can pull back and look in the grand scheme of life. A $5 coffee or professional is probably not the end of the world one way or another. But that anchoring a reference point for, is that too much money? And so, it's just, we've got all these internal rules about what's appropriate, what's too much, what's not enough. And they're all sitting there in our memory and in our mind, just waiting to be triggered by all kinds of different scenarios. I've had another client where we were talking about the shock that he felt. He thought he was a very supportive husband until his wife came and said, we're going to need to financially support my mom. And it's going to be, $1,000 a month. And then initially, oh my God, we can't do that. That's not going to work. It'll never work. And it took him some time to realize the deeper layers of what this meant for his wife, and that they actually have the money in their cash flow to be able to support something like that. So, just recognizing that sometimes we've got these old money rules, these ideas that we've accumulated over the course of our life about what's appropriate or not appropriate, that may actually be more based in our past than what our present reality is. And so being able to update our sense of where are we at in life and money will help us create more flexibility on a wide variety of different financial decisions that we're going to make over the course of our life. And what's appropriate today and what's appropriate 5 years from now will change over time. Joel, before we were preparing for this presentation, we were talking a little bit about how much life has changed in 15 years since we first met, and how your own sense of money has grown and changed over time. And, I think that that's something that can be hard to fully know and appreciate, especially if you're on the younger end of the age continuum. But, as you move into your late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, you start to realize just how much even your attitudes around money can change. So I've already started alluding to it, but the surprising thing that I found is this question has nagged at me for a long time. Why do couples fight about money? I mentioned in my introduction that I was a firefighter. That was my first career. And when I was sitting around the fire station, what would I hear? I would hear the guys complain about two things: their wives and money. And it left me with my head scratching. Like, what gives? What's going on here? I don't understand. Stable income. We should be able to work through this. And as I've gone through now and gone back to school and studied about family development and family experiences, what I recognize is almost a near universal experience is that we all have some painful experiences with money in our families that can sometimes be driving the way that we interact in adulthood and our adult relationships around money. It can bring forward certain fears, anxiety, or shame. So why is it that couples fight about money? Well, in my estimate, a lot of times there's things in their family background that are kind of driving today's presentation. Why does that happen? Well, it actually creates emotional pain, and our brains are wired to remember things that have high emotional valence or high emotional intensity. Literally, that's the memories get encoded in a different way in our brain when there's higher degrees of emotional intensity. And so when you grow up in a family where there may be high degrees of financial conflict or betrayal or mistrust, or even on the silent side, the absence of conversation about money is really loud. We've all heard that phrase that silence can be deafening. What's not said sometimes is louder than what is said, right? Because we're perceiving through our childhood, we're wired to perceive the emotional tone of things. So when mom's pissed off at dad. When dad's not real happy with mom, right? I'm not alone in this. I only get to see Joel, David, and I'm not sure, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name. I'm sure I'm not the first person.
It's okay. It's like so high with B at the end. So high.
So hide.
Yeah.
Hide. Yeah. All right. Does this resonate? So hide?
Of course. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's the emotional pain is the psychological experience of watching our parents have conflict around money. But then what's really interesting is we also have the somatic memories, the memories that get stored in our body and the physical sensations. This is where people will talk about their chest gets really tight, or their stomach will twist, or their shoulders will slump over, right? We have, as our mind goes through different states of threat, we'll have physical reactions to it that also get stored. And so now we have a pairing of some stimulus, some experience with an emotion and a physical response. That pattern, if it repeats over and over again, becomes part of the way that we see the world and will drive our many financial conflicts. Now, the challenge is it's not just you in the relationship, right? It's you and your significant other. And they have had their own host of different experiences in their family around where mom and dad, mom and stepdad, mom and or dad and stepmom, whatever that family constellation was in conflict. So as we can draw up and get more comfortable with those old memories, it's going to start to create, it may initially create some distress to have to remember these old things, but it's like, if you don't ever look at the map, you're going to keep running into dead ends. And being able to look at your memories is like learning how to look at the map and know what's likely setting you off on the wrong direction. So what I'd like to do now is just another very small, simple money exercise that I use in my practice to help people connect this concept. And what I'd like you to do is see if you can reflect on a challenging money memory from your childhood. Maybe not the most painful experience, but something that was just mildly distressing for you. And what I'd like you to do is to pull that up into your mind and your memory. And then I'm going to just ask you to do a body scan. I'm going to verbally cue you to pay attention to different sensations or any sensations in your body, like tingling, numbness, tension, heat, coldness, any sensation. And I'd like you to just try to become aware of that. So you can get up a challenging money memory in your mind. And what I'd like you to do is just start at the top of your head. Oh, you guys are mostly dentists. So what I really want you to pay attention to is tension in the jaw. Okay? All right. Joel, actually, I'm going to before we get going on this, I have a research. I don't know how to do it with you, but I want to research money stress and dental. This is where you guys are the experts, but TMJ or tooth breakdown due to psychological financial stress. I'm just going to put it out there on your
Sounds
list.
great. I know Dr. Dean over there's kind of at one of the centers for oral facial pain, and we definitely do a significant amount of it. So, yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Maybe some collaboration here with a marriage and family therapist that wants to research financial stress and poor dental health outcomes. All right, back to my agenda. Sorry. Okay, so just pull up this memory from your own childhood around something challenging with money. Starting at the top of your head, just notice for any sensations around the top of your head, coming down slowly through your jaw, down into your neck, down through your shoulders, down into your chest, slowly down now into your abdomen, slowly through your hips, through your legs, the tops of your legs, the backs of your legs, down over your knees, down through your lower legs, and now out through your feet. And if anyone's willing to say that they noticed something and they feel comfortable, you don't have to say what the memory was, but if you feel comfortable sharing what the sensation was, that would be wonderful. You can drop it in the chat box too.
Say it's almost like you get some stress working but then as it works its way down, it almost relieves itself, almost cleanses itself.
Yeah, it's a really common phenomenon, Joel, is when we can actually become aware of the physical sensation in our body and then bring attention to it and acknowledgement. And then as we scan through our body and move down through our feet, this is where that phrase "we get grounded" comes from. It moves the energy that's usually stuck in your body in a particular place and starts to move it out and through and down into your feet. So there's, this is far outside of my particular area of specialty, but in the feet and the grounding is one of the ways that people are able to discharge a lot of emotional residual stress. Right, so getting grounded, getting your feet on the ground really helps the body rebalance itself. Now, not all doom and gloom here. Let's move to the positive side of the equation. I hope that everybody has at least one good money memory from their childhood. And I'd like for you to take a moment to see if you can pull up a good money memory from your childhood. And again, we're just going to do a body scan. So I'd like you to just start at the top of your head. Again, noticing anything that's happening at the top of your head, down through your jaw, slowly through your neck, down into your shoulders, down through your chest, down into your stomach, through your hips, into your legs, your upper legs and your lower legs, and now out through your feet. What do you notice this time about your body that's different as you've reflected on a positive money memory? And again, anybody's free to chime in. There's plenty of time and space.
I started to smile. With the first one, my teeth were definitely together, and was clenching and tense. And in the second, my corners of my mouth started to turn up, and I just felt a lot lighter.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's a very common phenomenon. And so what we notice is that, as we're moving through our life and we come up against these different financial topics, our bodies are actually going to have these strong physical reactions. And that physical distress is a signal that something's wrong. Something needs to be addressed. And the challenge is when we're in an intimate relationship with our partner, we don't always have the best tools to get the soothing that we need, or have our partner be able to help us get calm again around the situation. And so we can get stuck with a lot of money tension in our bodies. So that's what we're going to start moving towards is, okay, great. And I believe you. I feel it. I've felt it. I've been in a money fight with my partner before. True? Anybody agree with that? They've had some sort of financial conflict with their partner. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not alone. You're completely normal if that has happened. All right. All right, so when we get a little deeper into what's happening to us psychologically in our intimate relationships, something that we want to keep in mind is that we all have what's called an attachment system. This attachment system is a psychological and biological process that helps us bond with our primary caregivers. From the earliest ages, it sets off a cascade of experiences and memories and self-regulation within our bodies that help us determine the expectations of how our primary caregivers are going to respond to us. If we had to relearn the way that our primary caregiver is going to take care of us every time, we wouldn't make any progress doing anything else, right? So we build an internal mental image of our primary caregivers. That's well and good if we have caregivers that are able to be relatively attentive to us and recognize when they're misattuned to us and make that correction. But if we have primary caregivers that are unavailable to us for any number of different reasons, it can leave our attachment system a bit twisted in expectations about how somebody is going to provide care for us when we're in distress. Now, remember, when we're in financial distress, we need caregiving. We need to be understood and taken care of. We all have wired in biological need to have other people in our life that can see, know, and understand us. We're wired for a co-regulatory experience a lot of the time. Now, I know that we're all high-functioning adults, capable. You've gotten through dental school, smart, capable. I get it. Individual, you have to do much of it on your own. But we still fundamentally have to turn to other people to get some of our emotional, relational needs met. Attachment studies have been going on for, I don't know, 70, 80 years at this point, and there's really well-defined research in this body of knowledge. And people can become categorized in broadly 4 categories: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. What I'd like you to do is just to watch this short experiment. It's called the still face experiment. It initially started with mothers and their babies, but I'm showing this one because it's fathers and their babies. And it's the same phenomena, but as men, for the men in the group, I'm putting a little challenge on you that we're needed in the caregiving environment just as much as the moms. So let's take a quick look at this 4-minute or so video.
What we've learned over the years is that babies are much more capable than we initially imagined, but they're also much more vulnerable. And in Ed Tronick's still face experiment, we get to see both in a very short period. We see the baby and the dad playing together in their routines. There are things that they know about each other and things that they do together, and it's fun. And then we ask the dad to turn away, and when he turns back, to keep his face completely still and not respond to the baby. And the results are almost immediate, and they're devastating. The baby looks to the dad and tries to get the dad to get back into those games. Hey, we were just playing just a minute ago, weren't we? We were having fun. What's going on? And then the baby starts to get frustrated when that doesn't work. So she'll have to look away and look around the room and find something else and then look back and say, now can we play? And within 3 minutes, the baby has really dissolved. She is trying to get out of the chair. She's uncomfortable. She's reaching out to dad. She's crying. And then we ask the dad to turn away again. And when he turns back, to go back to being regular dad. And it's a joyous reunion. They get back into their routines, the things that they do together, the things that they were just doing 3 minutes before. And the baby settles down and gets back to the comfort zone that she's developed with the dad. What we see in the still face experiment is how able the child is to initiate and be part of the relationship between the father and the child, but also how much she depends on that relationship in order to keep an even keel. And when she's grounded and comfortable, she can explore the world. She can meet new people. She can try new things. And she's got that safe base that she can always rely on. And there's a trust level there. We can only begin to imagine what it's like for babies whose life is like that 3 minutes all of the time. And they don't get that responsiveness, and they don't get any help getting back to an even keel. And the results can be very tragic. They can have trouble trusting people. They can have trouble relating to people. And they can have trouble being calm enough so that they can explore the world and take part in the world. So we know that those initial relationships, that initial responsiveness and interaction between the father and the baby are keys to the baby's success as a child and as an adult.
So I hope that was a touching little video to see, and it probably stirred a lot inside of you. Just watching someone have a flat face to the baby and the baby fall into distress is challenging. I can remember though, entering grad school counseling program, having been a firefighter, having years of business school training, and I saw this video for women, and it rattled me. It really startled me to start to consider just what a profound impact my own mother and father have had on my life. And what has that meant for me in my own development and the way that I experience interpersonal relationships, and particularly interpersonal relationships. And so what we know from the science is that when we develop an internally secure attachment, that's when that parent becomes responsive when the child's in distress. They have this internal template and expectation that there's someone there outside of them that can care for them when they're in distress. They also grow up into an adult that when they experience their partner in distress, they're not overwhelmed or put off by that. They can show up and engage in caretaking for their partner as well. So they grow into adulthood where it's a reciprocal process, where they both have an expectation that they can be cared for, and that they're going to need to be a caretaker for their significant other. That's the lifespan perspective of attachment. Now, what we also know is if you develop more of an anxious attachment style from childhood, you're going to have a harder time trusting your own internal resources to meet your needs when someone else is not there to care for you. And you're more prone to look for other people for affirmation, support, love, and care. And here's the real trick of the anxious attachment style is even when people start to give you that positive affirmation that you long and want for, you're not going to believe that it's true. And so you're going to be stuck in this perpetual cycle of looking for affirmation and acceptance and never really quite sure whether you received it or not. The other side of this continuum is more of the avoidant attachment style. People that develop the avoidant attachment style have more of a dismissing orientation to needing or relying on other people, especially in situations of distress. They're going to minimize the need of counting on anybody else. They're going to have an internal expectation that the other person can't possibly understand me. They won't care. Even if I try, it's not worth it. The last one is disorganized attachment. The disorganized attachment pattern vacillates between anxious and avoidant attachment patterns. Now, this is really important to keep in mind because this is your primary pattern of showing up in relationships, especially in intimate relationships. And so becoming curious about what is my pattern of attachment and what is my partner's will help you to start setting up a predictable expectation for what's going to happen when either of us fall into distress. Our attachment organization is relatively consistent because our patterns within our families are relatively consistent. And so we internalize this pattern. This is not something that can easily be changed just by having a little bit of information about it. It takes a lot of work for your attachment patterns to grow towards the secure end of the continuum if you're not already there. It's not fatalistic and you're doomed to always having an insecure attachment pattern, anxious or avoidant, but it will take significant effort to move there. That's not something that can just change on its own. So understanding this as the backdrop for now when we're going in to talk about any one of the money areas, what's happening is really the attachment system is getting activated. Are you there for me? Are you with me? Can we make this decision together? Can I trust that we're really in this together or not? Because so much of our financial decision making has an impact on our partner's future life and what that means. And so being able to be coordinated is really quite a significant accomplishment. That's it. No, don't do the video again. Let's keep going. So now the next big surprise for me in this journey of figuring out, well, what's really stopping people from moving forward in their relationship with themselves and their partner and money? What you notice at this point in the presentation is I have not once talked about technical knowledge of how money works. That's where most of us start when we think about solving the money problem. That's, Lord knows that's where I started. I thought, if I just know how money works, I will not experience what the guys experienced at the fire department. And I won't experience what I experienced in my own home with my mom being frustrated with my dad and what he did with money. And yes, so learning all about personal finance and earning my certified financial planner designation was a wonderful thing. And I developed confidence in understanding how money technically works. But I really still had no fundamental understanding of how I work or how my wife works from a psychological perspective. So I couldn't understand why we weren't getting on the same page when I would come home and say, okay, we need to save this much money this year. And she would look at me like, you're crazy. We're not saving that much money this year. We're going to have some fun. Not exactly how it went down, but kind of close to that. I had my own financial, what I would call rigidity, where I wanted to get out of debt as absolutely fast as possible and accumulate as much money as quick as possible so we would never have to worry about it. And she would say, but you don't know, we could die tomorrow. I don't, well, yes, that's true, but I still want to, and so that was part of our dance. What I wasn't taking into account was kind of some of our own attachment styles. And then at a deeper level, really how trauma in our histories shape our expectations of our life progression, our ability to self-regulate ourselves, interactively regulate, to have a positive sense of ourselves. And so what I also know is culturally, I think we think that a lot of successful people don't have much trauma in their background. Some people have different views on that, but generally we say if you're successful, we don't really think that could be any trauma in your background. That's not what the statistics show at all. As I was going along and learning and continuing to study, even postgraduate, what really is stopping people from making progress in life, I came across a really important study, and I don't know if you guys have seen this study in your work at all for negative health outcomes, but it's the ACE study. Anybody familiar with the ACE study? Okay, so the ACE study is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. This is a really landmark study in the field, starting initially in the field of weight management and weight reduction. These are clinical, this was a clinical setting. Dr. Vincent Felitti was in Southern California working under the Kaiser Permanente healthcare system, and he was treating people with significant weight issues. He would help them drop the weight. And then they would come back to his clinic 3-6 months later, and they would have put the weight back on. And he would ask them, well, what happened? And they would start to tell him the story. And he started putting the pieces together. And what he started to realize is that they would actually start to attract positive attention to themselves, which was threatening, paradoxically. Well, because as he asked more questions, what he realized is that they had had adverse experiences in their childhood, sexual abuse being one of them, emotional abuse being one of them, physical abuse being one of them, not feeling loved in their family, right? So this ACE study, so as he started to do the interviews, he compiled these 10 major categories, is what we see up here in truncated question form. And he was able to do a large empirical study correlating the relationship between increased levels of ACE and worse health outcomes. First in the area of weight, but then it has expanded into looking and seeing that most adverse health outcomes have a basis in people having higher rates of trauma. This study was done on a population that was primarily middle class and well insured. This is not the poor population that we think about having the bad health outcomes. This was the middle class. So what we want to know for our own selves, and if we have trauma in our background, is to recognize that we probably need to do some sort of therapeutic work to bring resolution to it. The mind is organized to protect itself as it experiences trauma, especially in childhood. This is why we see the insecure attachment patterns develop. It actually provides its own sense of safety, if you think about it. Becoming relationally dismissing and not relying on other people actually gives you self-preservation if your parent cannot consistently meet your needs. You don't want to keep going back to them expecting they're going to meet your needs and then not having them meet your needs. That becomes crippling in a completely different way, right? So if you have your own history with trauma, it's going to make it harder and more likely that you're going to get triggered or financially frustrated. If your partner has trauma in their history, it means it's more likely that they're going to get triggered and feel overwhelmed and have problems with self-confidence, the ability to explore and engage into new concepts that feel threatening and overwhelming, of which money very much fits that category. Let's see here. I have a number of clients where their ACE score is 7 or 8. Some of them are in high functioning professional jobs, others are not. But when they face significant life transitions, they easily get overwhelmed. So it does not take having an 8 ACE score though for this to become problematic. Even a 1 can be enough to really have some challenges. I have a number of clients that are highly educated professionals where they mostly just have a 1 and it's emotional abuse or neglect. That alone has been enough to twist in their own perception of their ability to feel safe and secure and understood in relationships. So it just doesn't take a lot. And so I realize that this can feel overwhelming if you've not been confronted with this or thought about this, but it is something that is so important to at least start to entertain as part of explaining why you may be getting stuck in financial conflict. So what we know, and this is really tying with the study, the still face experiment that we just saw, right? If we can have a conceptual model of what's happening, all of us humans are wired to have a flow of emotion, evidenced by the yellow line. That's the way that we're supposed to work. But what happens is when we have these attachment environments that are not good enough, and we have trauma in our background, our ability to stay in the window of the tolerance, in the middle zone where we're grounded, flexible, open, curious, present, able to emotionally self-regulate. Can you see how all these attributes will be really helpful for navigating your financial life? And if we are leaving our window of tolerance, that's that emotional zone of reasonable good functioning, and we're going into hyperarousal, too much emotion, we have high energy, anxiety, anger, overwhelm, hypervigilance. We're in the fight or flight or chaotic response. Our brain is going offline. We're losing access to the prefrontal cortex, which is so much of the executive decision-making part of our brain that we need to make logical financial decisions. But if we are in emotional overwhelm, logical decisions don't work anymore. The other side can be true is if we go into hyperarousal, and we have I'm trusting that you guys know a lot of this anatomy, you probably even know it some better than me, but it's parasympathetic arousal. This is all part of the autonomic nervous system. Head nods, you know about the autonomic nervous system? Good enough, remember that, right? So hyperarousal is on that collapse side, the shutdown, the numb, the depression, the passive, the withdrawn, the freeze, the shame. These are all a wide range of human capacities. We've probably all experienced some of them. And it's not necessarily terrible that we dip into hyperarousal or into hyperarousal. That's not necessarily a terrible thing. It's when we get stuck and we can't get back down or we can't get back up into that window of tolerance. We were wired, as you saw, how quickly when those dads re-engaged their babies, they came out of either hyperarousal or hyperarousal and back into the window of tolerance of engagement, flexible, playing, curious. The same thing is happening when we're coming into money talks. We can be going along just fine and then, hey, honey, did you pay that bill? What? What do you mean? Why? Sorry, I was just asking you if you paid the bill. But that reactivity flares into the hyperarousal. We're no longer talking about paying a bill. We're talking about something else. We've got to change the energy, not into a logical, I'm just trying to pay the bill, but we've got to work into recognizing the anger, overwhelm, and anxiety. Is this all making sense? Okay. So what can we do about it? Well, one of the primary tools that I use in therapy every day, and I'm coaching my clients into one way or another, is empathy. And accurate empathy is so important because what happens is it hits the mirror neurons in our brain and gets them to light up. And when the mirror neurons light up, we get into resonance circuits, the constellation of mirror neurons coming together. When we get into resonance circuits, then we feel felt, which is security. Now, here's the funny paradox, is a lot of times really good intended partners say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. You should be proud of yourself. You should be confident. It's okay. But that's actually not mirroring. That's not empathy. Empathy is being able to join with the person and reflect back to them what they're actually experiencing now, not as an accusation, but as a recognition that they're in this state. I was talking with another client recently where she had flown off the handle, felt really bad about it, and it was just on her, I just don't even know why you want to stay with me. I can't even imagine. It's just terrible. I should leave. She's collapsed into hypoarousal. And he's saying, no, but I love you. It's okay. You're great. And she said it actually trapped her further down in that hypoarousal and shame. I said, what would have happened if your husband would have come alongside you and said, wow, I can see you're feeling really bad about yourself right now. That you're really upset with yourself about having flown off the handle at me. And you could just watch her face come alive. Right? We're just reflecting on something that had happened 48 hours ago. And you could see her coming back. That was empathic attunement. So empathic attunement is about mirroring where your partner is, not where you think they should be or shouldn't be. That's a really big and important shift in secure relationships. Once your partner comes back into the window of tolerance, that's the time for the validation and the support and a little bit more of the rah-rah. But when your partner is in the hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, the emotional attunement, the empathic attunement of where they're at is really the foundation of what's going to help you get through that. So no, does empathy fix everything? If there's profound and significant trauma, major attachment injuries, is it going to heal all of it? No, but it's a foundational piece that you can practice and learn about. There's so much great information on the internet about empathy and developing empathic attunement. That's a big thing, is in these insecure, anxious, and avoidant attachment, they're really empathy failures. The hard thing is that oftentimes it's not the parent's intention to have these empathic failures. They just don't know. No one's taught them about this. So they think that being critical will be helpful. They think that just holding back and not saying much will be helpful. They'll figure it out. But those both miss an opportunity to meet the child where they're at. Okay, so now we've got all this background psychological information. Some of it might feel a little overwhelming and scary. Some of it might feel new. And I hope at least a small slice of it is like, I can figure some of this out. This is going to be good, right? But what we know is you're going to have to face your finances. There's no avoiding it. You have to engage in the money world. And some of you might say, yeah, Ra, I'm with you, Ed. I love the money world. And some of you might be saying, I'm only on here because Joel invited me and I like Joel. But maybe there's one or two of those at least, huh? It's all right. We can be on the continuum of how comfortable we are with money. But what we know is you're going to have to re-engage these topics. And I put them somewhat in order of how often you're going to have to engage them. Spending and saving. Most of us spend something every single day. So we're dealing with that all the time. And some of that spending can be like a grain of sand in the shoe, and it can cause some big blisters down the road. And if you don't pay attention to it, even bigger problems, right? But being able to get coordinated around your spending and saving is a huge deal. I was working with another couple where they've been married 20 plus years. They had never been able to talk about their spending patterns in a way that was productive. She developed patterns of hiding what she was spending because she felt so antagonized by her husband, who, oh, by the way, was very financially anxious. His financial anxiety was not irrational. It was actually based in his childhood experiences, growing up in relative poverty and his father's own financial mismanagement. And what that felt like with him led him to become hyper vigilant to trying to manage everything with money. Well, that anxious energy was not something that left his wife real excited about wanting to connect with him on money. So instead of telling him like, hey, I went to spend this money at the store to buy this for work, she would just not tell him. Well, then he would get the credit card bills. And what do you think happens when he gets the credit card bills? Nah. Can't believe you're doing this. Why are you doing this? Stop doing this. She's pulling away more and more. Now, we worked together about 3 to 6 months, somewhere in that range. Things are starting to stabilize. She's starting to understand that he's not this terrible, mean money guy, that he actually has some really painful experiences from his family origin around money. She develops some more compassion for him. He softens up. He learns that, oh, no one ever talked with her about money. No one explained it to her. They treated it like it was a big secret in the family. And so she had this internal sense that she didn't really know what to do with money. Keep in mind, these are both highly educated professionals. They're capable, they run, one of them, the female actually runs budgets as a part of her work. So this is also something I see all the time. Is personal finance professionals in particular, and I know you guys are not that, but they will be excellent at running spreadsheets at work. But as soon as it comes to being at home, it gets messy because they go into a different state of mind. It's like all the stuff that they know how to do at work leaves them and they are back into their family of origin mindset, right? So helping get to that place of being able to talk about spending and saving from securely attached patterns will go to great benefit. This couple reflected at the end of the 3 to 6 months, man, if we had known this and figured this out, we would have gotten 20 years of compound interest back. That's a huge deal. If you know how compound interest works, oh, I just lost a light. Hopefully you guys can still see me okay. I just went off. Okay, you can still see me good enough? All right. Right? What happens with compound interest? How does money grow? Is it a straight line or is it a curved line? It's curved. And guess where the curve starts? It's at about year 20 where it starts getting pretty darn steep. The first 2 or 3 years, not very impressive. 5 to 7 years, starting to see a little bit. 7 to 10, getting more. 20 years. So this is really a big deal. Getting off on the right foot, being able to get coordinated around your finances is a huge deal, because if you can't get on your savings plan together early on, you're going to be losing a lot of years. Okay. So in learning about investing in retirement, for a lot of people, this is not natural vernacular. No one has taught them the words of investing. And so, as dental students, what was it like for you in your first year of dental school? How many new words did you have to learn? I'm just going to guess a gazillion. Well, the good news is you don't have to learn a gazillion new words for investing, but you probably got about 500. That's just an ed guess. I have no idea, never counted. But let's just say it's a couple hundred new words. And we know that people go through phases of learning. There's a great little framework out there if you're into super nerdy stuff. Look up Bloom's taxonomy of learning. It'll explain to you why it takes you so darn long to get something mastered. The first layer is effectively just learning the words and the definitions. The next phase is starting to apply them. The last phase at the top of the pyramid is bringing them all together, right? So we're somewhere on our money journeys of learning words and how to put them together. So we want to be able to talk about investing in retirement. We want to remember that it can feel like a threatening and overwhelming topic. I have another couple where, see if this fits in your world. He's very future oriented and she's very present oriented. Guess how easy it is for them to talk about their retirement plan? Not easy, right? This also circles back to some of knowing if your partner had trauma and they had a lot of dashed hopes and fears, planning for the future is not something they're going to be real keen to. On the other end of it, some people with high trauma become so future oriented that they never enjoy the present because they're trying to think about how to create security for themselves in the future. And for some people, they mistake accumulating a lot of money or income as security, of which it is not, because if you don't have relational security, at some point, your relationship will crumble and your finances will follow. Okay, so we have to work a two-pronged approach to getting financial security. We've got to work building the financial security and the relationship security to make sure that it all really works out. This is why I put a lot of emphasis on the relationship. Okay, we all know about the tax man. There's two guarantees in life. You will die and you will have to pay taxes. The rest is negotiable. Okay, it's a little extreme, I get it. But taxes are a huge deal. I've worked with a number of couples. You guys, many of you will end up in private practice. You're going to have to manage tax liability, setting that aside. So many small business owners who are not business savvy get behind on taxes. That can become a huge burden, drives people into secrecy. The secrecy drives them into shame, and things start to spiral. So just know that there are many great qualified professionals out there that would love to help you. Make sure you stay on top of your taxes and you plan accordingly. Insurance, again, is a really important topic. You've got to spend time working together. Life insurance is a huge deal. I know we're talking about death. Hello, death is the biggest fear we all have. Even if you're 100% certain about what happens to you after you die, you still have death anxiety. Okay? So we need to look at life insurance. We need to think about disability insurance and be able to talk about that. The big boo and the hardest thing is estate planning. And as young professionals, you may think this has nothing to do with me. And I want to tell you, it has everything to do with you. You may not have a lot of accumulated assets yet, but you want to be thinking about what's going to happen in your passing. How will you want to have things structured? What will happen? How, more importantly, at this point in the journey, early in your own professional life, is how have you seen it go right and wrong in your own families? You are old enough now that probably at least some of your grandparents have passed away. You have watched your family organize around the transition of assets and things that have gone well or not well. So has your partner. I work in an environment where I work with a number of clients who are trust recipients. They have wealthy family members that set up trust, and the trusts dictate how the assets are distributed to them. This is a huge area of potential psychological distress. I'll leave it at that simple. So being able to understand the estate planning environment and trust and knowing that there exists, and if you or your partner has trust or expected inheritances, that's going to have a large psychological bearing on the way that you're thinking about making your financial decisions related to, spending and saving. Because if you're expecting a large inheritance, you may have less motivation for investing for your own retirement or managing your day-to-day spending. So this is where you've really got to understand your world and your partner's world. Okay, I'm only going to give you a short snapshot on this, but this is one of these great things that I learned In graduate school, we're family therapists. We get to draw family trees. Why do we draw family trees? Well, because we process information differently when it's visual and not in the written word. And so what I've become very fond of doing is starting to draw family trees that map the patterns of money. Now, this might be not something you leave tonight and be like, you know what? I loved it. Ed's presentation was great. I'm going to go draw the family tree and do the money thing. But I encourage you to at least start thinking about maybe how this could work in your life, right? So if we look at this very, very simple family tree, at the very top here, we have squares are men, circles are women. Don't read anything into it. I know psychologists, we have all kind of layered meaning. This is not it. Squares, circles. We have a mom and a dad, one son. We have a mom and a dad, one daughter. They meet, let's just say for the fun of it, in dental school. And they have a son, right? In this very simple tree, we can see that there was anger on dad's side and fear on mom's side. The son picked up on that, and the anger passed on to the next generation. On this side, we had anxious dad and more secure mom around money and life. Daughter became a bit more secure. They partnered up and they have this son, right? We're just tracking and acknowledging that patterns of relating to money can pass from generation to generation. There's always a bigger story around why was dad, why was grandpa angry? Why was mom fearful? What did she learn? These are important questions to become aware of because they are playing in the backdrop of our psyches and the family stories that drive the way that we see the world. We know, think about this day in and day out in the hubbub of our life, but the reality is this is music that's playing in the background of our minds. So if you're wanting to see if there's any patterns, you can start with your own family tree. You can have your partner start to draw a family tree and just start putting words. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have all the technical knowledge to do it right and get some benefit out of it. But it is another way of gaining insight, right? In the therapy world, we talk a lot about insight. And the reason we talk about insight is because it's not until we get new insight that we can have new reflections that will lead to new action, right? So we want to gain deeper insight because then we can reflect on that and see how it's related to something else. And as we see how one thing is related to another thing from a different perspective, we can take a different action. This is a big part of now knowing my wife's backstory, her family story around money. Why she would tell me, well, Ed, you could die tomorrow, or we could die tomorrow, or things could not work out. As I know her history, it's like, oh, now I get it. You're not just trying to be a killjoy. You're not just trying to stop me from planning from the future. You have some carried forward anxieties about what's happened in the past and how that shapes your financial expectations. Okay, so understanding the family story helps to put context around why we or our partner are doing what they're doing. And until we really get a good understanding of the story, a lot of this stuff is going to look pretty irrational. Okay, one of the last areas that I really want to touch on is financial transparency and intimacy. Now, you may have never thought that you have the goal in your life to create financial intimacy in your life, but I'd like to plant that seed today. Financial intimacy is that ability to be completely, are you ready for this? Financially naked with your partner. Now, I know that probably each of you enjoy your sex life. I hope that you do. And that involves a lot of vulnerability. Our financial life is the same way. We want to get everything out in the open so that we can figure out what's pleasurable, not pleasurable, and how we can work well together so that we have really pleasurable experiences. So we've got to work through figuring out how to disclose earnings, bonuses, and savings to talk about that. Can you trust your partner's financial judgment and management? Are you able to share your financial hopes and dreams as well as your fears and shame? There's some growing empirical evidence around financial transparency and relational distress. There's a lot of anecdotal polls out there by credit card companies in particular that say somewhere between 40 and 70% of couples have one or more secret accounts. Let that set in for a minute. And you may be in that company and there's no judgment. Look, I know there's a lot of reasons why we hold financial secrets. I've been there. I've gone down that slippery slope and made that mistake myself. But if you're finding yourself where you have to keep financial secrets, it should be a red flag that there's something in the relationship that needs some attention. If we're not able to get to financial transparency, it's going to be really hard to have full financial trust. And having that full financial trust is part of what helps us move and plan towards the future, right? So getting all these pieces to work together is not an easy process. There's a lot to figure out and learn. Tonight's goal is just to help expand and give you some other places to consider reflecting on and learning more about, so that you can take further steps on your own journey towards financial well-being, relational well-being. All right, so this, I think I'm almost sure this is my last slide. Let me just double check. Yep, all right. We're on the home stretch. Joel, I think we're gonna come in right at about 75 minutes. How about that? Okay, so we want to launch well. You guys have done a lot of work to get to this point in your residency. You got a lot of life ahead of you. I'm so excited for you. God, I just am blown away by how much life has grown and changed in 15 years since my wife finished her residency. I'm excited for you. The field of dentistry is an incredible field. Incredible. It is incredible. I hope that you can enjoy it. As you're thinking about launching well into your life, I'd like you to be open to learning more about your attachment style and your partner's style. It's going to help you better understand the dance that the two of you get engaged in. I'd like you to be open to understanding each other's trauma history. This is a sensitive topic. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, please find a good therapist to help you walk through this. It's not an easy journey, but I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, it is an absolutely worthy journey. Learn how to care for each other's emotional states, using that affect regulation window of tolerance model as just something you can keep coming back to and checking in and saying, where am I? Am I in the middle zone, happy zone? Am I over the top or out the bottom? Are they in the middle, out the top or over the bottom? If you're over the top or out the bottom, let's take off into the practical money decisions. Let's work on getting back to the middle. And once we're in the middle, then we can figure out what we need to do next. If we're out the top or out the bottom, there's no need to work on getting to solutions. It's just not, it's going to fall flat. Learn how to explore each area of money together to see how they're related, right? This is those 5 areas of saving, spending, investing, and retirement, the taxes, the insurance, and the estate planning. They are all deeply interrelated with each other. Joel, I think, has taught you a little bit about the field of financial planning. Continue to explore and recognize and figure out who are the most highly qualified professionals you can work with to explore and see how all these different areas are interrelated with each other. And lastly, build financial intimacy. I'm grateful. While my wife and I do not have a perfect financial life, we've spent years learning how to talk about money, and we're mostly pretty darn effective at this point. We share relatively equal levels of competence on the foundational knowledge that's necessary to have coordinated communication where we both feel like we know what we're talking about. I see this happen all the time where one partner knows everything about how money works and the other one does not know anything. And it's a recipe for problems at some point. I've worked with a couple of accountants who work with widows, female widows a lot. And these women are dealing with compounded grief because they've not only lost their partner, but they are now at sea around how to manage their money because they've not taken the time to learn how to deal with it. So this is really very important to find ways to help your partner become engaged in the finances. And you will do them a great service because, guys, I hate to say it, but I think the statistics say we still die younger by quite a number of years. And so a great way to take care of your partner is to help make sure that you guys are on the same page as you go along in life together. Joel, I'm going to open the floor for questions and comments at this point, and then I'll put up my finishing slide where they can see how to connect with me and all that fun jazz. So that sounds good for you.
Absolutely. And so anybody just feel free to either, raise your hand or, just unmute yourself. Or again, if you're shy about speaking up, just type in the chat box and make sure that it's seen by everybody. First of all, while everybody's thinking, I just kind of wanted to thank you. It's funny, as you're giving your talk, I'm just kind of like, some things are just kind of hitting home. You're just like, yep. That definitely applies to me here. And but I guess I can kind of start some questions. Going back to the family tree, and I thought that was a really fascinating way of kind of showing it, and how individuals get their baseline traits. And so we talk about individuals' traits, and if the father and the mother, the father was anxious and the mother was all about in a good space, and then the son ended up inheriting the anxiousness. We talk about it from an individual level, but how much do you think are you seeing this also in terms of generational level? In other words, if you've got children that are parents from the Great Depression, or in our case, we were children of baby boomers who had a pretty good flourished financially. So how much of a factor are you seeing that?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's one that requires a lot of attention to detail, because there are the large cohort experiences around money that shape experiences. And so the Great Depression of the 20s is certainly one that is endemic and gets dwelled in many people's minds. I have clients who are in their 70s and their mother is in her 90s. Plus, again, if I'm doing the math right, yeah, 90s, grew up, either was born just after the Great Depression or in that zone. And there's a lot of things that she's not changed. There's a lot of fear and anxiety that gets baked into it. And so, one of the types of traumas that we didn't get named in that ACEs study is cultural level trauma, right? So what we know is that there are still many people that are living in parts of the world where there's great financial instability, and they come to America with the expectation of increasing their financial security and stability. But what they don't leave behind is all the fear and anxiety that they bring forward with them from those experiences. And so the great thing is that our brains can remember a lot of stuff, and we can remember things that are scary and overwhelming and threatening, because ideally they're going to help us not do that again. But the reality is some of these things are so big and overwhelming that we don't ever forget them. And we don't really find a way to recognize that experience is now in the past and we're living in a different reality. So yeah, we've got to be really attuned to what was the financial backdrop, what were the bigger social realities for our parents coming up through the stages, and how did their families navigate those large cultural events, right? Because we also know that in any one society, there might be a cultural level event, but not all people have the same experience. And COVID is highlighting that in such a profound and significant way. There's segments of our society that have been pretty much unfazed financially, if not have benefited significantly, while others have been reeling and struggling. And so we want to pry into what was your family's experience of whatever said cultural level experience or society level experience. Does that make sense, Joel?
Yep, very much so.
I see Corbin dropped in a question, and it's a really great question, Corbin. He says, more of a financial question. Do you acquire all of your partner's debt after marriage? And I'd like to give you a two-part answer to this. There's the legal reality of your partner's debt, which varies state by state. And then there's the psychological reality of your partner's debt. Let me start from the psychological reality. Yes, you take on your partner's debt. That debt is part of their conscious awareness. It impacts all of their decision making. it will impact the way they relate to you and what you're doing with your money or not doing with your money. Psychologically, everything gets far more blended. The law will give a different definition of whose responsibility the debt is, and if it becomes a marital asset, or if it remains in the ownership of the person that brought it to the marriage if the marriage goes to dissolution or divorce, right? So what's really important is to understand that psychologically, once you're partnered with somebody, whatever's happening to them is also happening to you. There's no avoiding that. Now, on a technical standpoint, a lot of people will get into like, well, whose money? This is where things get challenging, is couples will think in silos. This is my money, this is your money. You have to use your money for these things. I have to use my money for those things. It ends up oftentimes inevitably leading to a lot of quibbling over getting to fair allocation. That arrangement starts from a place of fear and anxiety that you're not going to take care of me and I can't fully trust you with what's going to happen financially. I understand that that arrangement often is based in some very real past experiences where commingled funds have turned out not well. Let's be honest, entering into a marital relationship is one of the biggest risks that you can take in your life. There is no guarantee that this person is going to stick around over the course of your lifetime. Can't do it. Okay. This follows really nicely into the follow-up question, which is prenups and postnups. This is another huge issue that comes up for couples. And when you're starting out, we've got to look at this from several different layers. Again, I will use the psychological and the legal lens. I am not an attorney. Don't pretend to be an attorney. Don't want to be an attorney. Attorneys are trained to look at the world through a particular lens, which is risk management and protection. And so prenups and postnups make a lot of sense from a legal perspective. Where they break down is in a psychological, intimate relationship, because it is directly communicating to the other person that I don't trust that you're going to be here for me in the future, and I need to plan for that. Now, you can say all you want that I'm going to be here, I'm not going anywhere, you can trust me. But you're sitting on this document that basically says, if you don't do these things, here's what's going to happen. I can't make that decision for whether a prenup or a postnup is right for any one relationship. But what I can tell you is that it's going to create some real psychological hurdles. I have these cases in my practice as we're working on them right now. So it's a very delicate topic. Please don't hear me coming down harshly on anybody that has done or is asking for or will ask for one. I hold a lot of empathy for just how complex it is to commit your life and your financial life to another person. You've got to start from where you're at. And then we'll figure out how to move forward from there, right? I would say, as a couples therapist, and in an ideal world, that you can move towards a secure, functioning relationship. And the couples do that. And I see it happen in my practice. But I would be lying to say that there aren't couples that don't make it, right? I'm sure that you guys go in and probably your starting goal is to help restore teeth. But you know that not all teeth are savable. Is that fair to say? You generally want to save the teeth. Yeah?
Yes, that is fair to say.
Fair to say, you generally would like to save the teeth. And you do everything you can, but at some point the tooth is so far gone that you got to pull it, place the implant, and prep the crown. And maybe do a little periodontal work as well. Did I get that right? I feel like I should get that right. I'm married to a dentist. You guys know you get where I'm going, okay?
Sounding pretty good.
All right, close enough at least. Close enough for a therapist. So I hope that answers your question on prenups and postnups. They're a tricky thing. And I think starting from that place and being able to acknowledge where is this coming from Where I see this get even more complicated is two partners are ready to get married. They're excited to get married. And I've heard this story so many more times than I care to admit. Dad, often dad, I'm going to point the fingers because that's where it comes from a lot of time, is affluent dad says, honey, glad you're, maybe he says in a basic case, honey, I'm glad you're getting married. You need to have him sign a prenup. What? What do you mean? I can't do that. I don't want to do that. So this is where it's also understand this family system perspective is that we are not always making financial decisions solely on our own accord. Sometimes we're having to make financial decisions in awareness of what the broader family expectations are. It sets up some really painful and challenging family dynamics when you have parents enforcing or requiring prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements to the marital relationship. So it's tricky stuff, and it's worth being slow and intentional with.
Do you have any other questions from participants? I think I had one last one. If we don't get any, before we kind of be respectful of everybody's time and kind of wrap things up. But you mentioned how both members of the couple should have some sort of at least minimum understanding of the terms. Because probably I was one that benefited from just kind of riding off the coattails of my wife's knowledge, until I started learning it myself recently. And she's done very well for us. But do you still, is it more like you have a minimum threshold and then maybe one still manages it all, but you're transparent and financially naked, so to speak, throughout the entire process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I technically know more than my wife about money and how it works. She manages the day-to-day, week-to-week, and honestly, year-to-year finances more. She schedules appointments with the accountant and with the financial planner. Part of that was intentional so that she stays engaged, but part of it is it helps her have a sense of security and investment in what's going on. Right. So, yeah, I think you have to go case by case. My wife is also a better administrator than I am. Right. And you want the person that is attention to detail, methodical, managing the day-to-day, week-to-week things, because she makes sure they happen in a way that's a little more consistent. The reality is I managed fine before I got married, but I've been more than happy to let her manage that. And some couples will find as over the course of their relationship that responsibility needs to shift back and forth depending on who has the time and the space to manage it with kids, stage of career, work demands. So I think being flexible and fluid to seeing where does it fit and land well makes sense. I realize that a lot of times there's some pretty strong gender role expectations around that, and that can go both ways depending on the family that you grew up in. So it's not a universal. And I practice from a place of what's going to work best for the two of you. It doesn't matter. This is where it doesn't matter what your family did or what culture says is right. It's about figuring out what's going to work best for the two of you. I'm not saying to ignore what you learned from family or culture. Be aware of that because that's going to set some booby traps. But we ultimately want to get you to a place where the two of you have agreed on what's going to work best for the two of you.
And I guess a lot of it's probably also playing to each individual strengths. I think I'm a better big picture strategic planner, and I think my wife's better tactical and operational. And so it's whatever each individual person's strengths are in that situation. So, well, thank you for doing this. I know you have a couple things to just kind of talk about before we wrap things up, but this is wonderful information. And so, just kind of tell us a little bit about, yourself and some of the opportunities or exciting developments ahead.
Yeah, so I think the big thing is I have my book coming out this probably early summer is The Healthy Love and Money Way, where these concepts I'll expand on. I have a little bit more of my own personal story of how I've gotten to here, but it will really help solidify the concepts that I've introduced today. So that'll be coming out. Keep your eyes open on Amazon. If you want to connect and social media is your thing, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me at Healthy Love and Money. If you like more of the blog kind of way of getting information, you can find my blog and sign up for that at healthyloveandmoney.com. And there's ways to follow up connecting with me. On my website, you'll also find, I have a course. It's about 1 hour course called the Family Money Tree. And it'll take you into a little bit more detail about how to draw the family tree, some of the common symbols that we use, and how to start to identify some of those patterns that might be getting carried forward. So Joel, it's been a great honor to work with you on getting this presentation developed. I'm so thrilled that you're working on financial well-being for dentists and doctors. It's a huge need. There are great professionals out there, and you're not alone. Any money fear, anxiety, shame, embarrassment, it's been felt. You're not alone. Ask for help. It really is okay. And it's okay to find the wrong person first and learn from that and find someone better the next time. Right? Not everyone's going to be the right fit the first time. My wife and I have picked bad advisors. Be open to learning what is a good advisor. How do I know that I've got a good advisor? Ask around. So.
Wonderful. And so thank you so much. Thanks everybody who's here with us tonight. We'll probably be doing this again around this time next month. Just look out for the emails following up this session and also leading up to the next one. We'll also probably make the recording available to everybody. So without further ado, thanks everybody. Have a good night. We'll see you next month.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.